Tyria seems intact, so at least there's that. You see Balthazar?
No. Looked like he was vaporized in the explosion, but he apparently doesn't like to follow the rules I know.
Flashpoint was in many ways a really incredible patch, but to me the biggest takeaway is this huge mystery that has now been hanging over our heads since the concluding moments of the final instance, the volcano's core. And today I want to talk to you guys about that. I want to talk a lot about Balthazar, about his half-brother, and about exactly what could be going on here. Now, I warn you, this video is built on the backs of my Fissure of Woe tour from earlier in the week, my Flashpoint summary stuff, and my Balthazar specific lore video that I also did very recently. So be warned, I'm not going to teach you how to suck eggs here. Hopefully you guys understand at this point who Balthazar is, what he's all about, and we can just kind of dive into the juicy stuff. So the theory before the last instance triggers in Flashpoint, before we go to the volcano's core, but after Balthazar has been revealed to us, the suggestion to me, or my kind of headcanon, my idea, was that maybe if Balthazar is back, perhaps he's returned to Tyria, doing something similar to what Abaddon did many years ago, when Abaddon was incessant that the people of the world should have magic, and we've never quite understood the motivations there or what exactly was going on. Maybe ArenaNet were going to, through Balthazar have a change of heart and act a bit like Abaddon did way back when, and kind of explain both sides of the story at once. And there is some potential for this in Flashpoint as it's all concluded, but really the last instance throws that away, and it puts us in perhaps an even more intriguing place, because it suggests no, Balthazar doesn't really care about the humans. He's not desperate to give one specific faction lots of magic like Abaddon was desperate to give the Marganites magic. Balthazar suggests he doesn't care about us at all, that our planet is of no consequence, and he has bigger fish to fry. He's got his own agenda. And so that's what I want to talk about today. Let's pick out this last little speech he gives us in the last instance here.
Your kind will not stop my campaign.
Balthazar, what you're doing, you'll destroy Tyria.
Your wounds trivial. They have beaten me, dimmed my light, but they will see me now.
If you won't stop, then at least face me. For the honor of battle, of war.
Good thinking. A certain death sentence, but good thinking.
I've learned there's no honor in war. But if you crave the glory of the fray, Tamar, Tegan, Beast.
Okay, so just to recap there, he says, your kind will not stop my campaign. I like that line immediately by saying your kind. He's kind of distancing himself from humans or anyone on Tyria, really signifying, in my opinion, to us all that he is alien, that he is extra-Tyrian, and that he's not from around here. Also, I like the way that he says, you will not stop my campaign. As we know, this is a very warlike god, and the idea that he would view anything he does as a campaign is, a very militaristic view that I like very much as well. We say, you'll destroy Tyria, Balthazar, please stop. And he says, your home is a trivial concern. So this is a bit of a slap in the face for us. And it's very interesting as well as a line immediately, because if you guys recall, the images of Omad's machine, where we see all the orbs rotating around a center, and if you recall some of the images we've seen and the original cutscene we had in season 2 of this orb idea, the big central orb was once depicted as looking a bit like the pale tree, and there have been suggestions in the community that perhaps the central orb is Tyria, that Tyria is the be-all and end-all, that Tyria is, the main thing about which all these other orbs are rotating, and a lot of people have been very excited at that idea, and some people even were excited that the pale tree and the Silvarian stuff was somehow integral even to all of that. I was never a big fan of those theories, and when Balthazar comes here in this patch and he says, yeah, your home's a trivial concern, it kind of suggests to me that in the grand scheme of this, maybe that idea of a big central orb and Tyria being the be-all and end-all isn't correct. And I really like that. I like the idea of the world and the universe and the franchise as Tyria is just a part. It's just one planet and there are many planets and lots of different things going on. It somehow makes it feel more epic and greater to me. So I love that Balthazar is totally fine to throw Tyria into turmoil and chaos by destroying elder dragons, and he doesn't even seem to care. It's like, for him, life will go on. For him, there's more to think about. There, again, are bigger fish to fry. So I really like that. Your home is a trivial concern, obviously setting himself up immediately as an antagonist there, and quite blatantly too. I'll come back to that in a minute because it's kind of weird how blatant he is here. And then he says the big one, the big line here, which we're getting a lot of discussion out of today. He says, they, and we don't know who they is, they abated me, they dimmed my light, but they will see me now. So you've kind of got this theme of light and vision, right? Like, they will see me, they dimmed my light. When I first heard this, I got, it was such an exciting line because it reminded me of all these comparisons the devs have kind of drawn between gods and dragons to stars in the sky. If you guys recall, Dwayne specifically was really the one that was always being personified, like a star personified. You couldn't look at Dwayne without going blind. There's actually a constellation in the sky named after Dwayne. I think it's called Dwayne's Heart. Dwayne being a sun or a star or something is something that they've hammered in many times. And now here we seem to see some suggestions that they're even going along that with Balthazar a bit. Maybe I'm going a bit too deep into the metaphor there, but I loved this line. I thought it was so cool. And obviously the really important thing to take here is that someone is opposed to Balthazar. Someone has hurt Balthazar and now he seeks revenge against them. They are his bigger fish, all right? And we as the player character don't even ask him about this, infuriatingly. We just say, if you don't stop, then at least face me for the honor of battle of war. And then we get this other fascinating line as well after Timey butts in. Balthazar says, I've learned there is no honor in war. And then he says, but if you crave the glory of the fray, and he throws his dogs at us. So he has learned that there is no honor in war. So really those last couple of lines, those are the big ones. That's a lot of stuff that we can talk about here. So let's just take it top level first of all. The gist here, guys, is that Balthazar is a fallen god. I've already talked a little bit about this on the channel, but it would be worth going over again. This explains a lot of stuff, and he seems to be at odds with someone. Presumably, if he was a god and now he's a fallen god, and there seems to be a collection of people who don't like him, the immediate thing to think of is that he seems to be at odds with the other gods. It seems like maybe Dwayna and Melandru and Grenth and Lissa and Cormyr, these guys don't necessarily like Balthazar anymore. Now, that they could be anyone else, we'll talk about in a second, but that top level seems to be what it is. They abated me, they dimmed my light. This explains a great deal of things about Balthazar, about the way he's acted, his capabilities since he's come to Tyria. It explains why he's not been overly powerful. It explains why he's sought factions of people to work alongside him. And it seeks why he's trying to destroy two elder dragons to take their power, to bring himself back up to godliness and, you know, get revenge on these people he feels has wronged him. So the question then, if he's a fallen god, is why? Why has he fallen out of favor with the other gods? What is going on here? So there are two big theories, and both of them have some credit. Both of them are very similar as well. But main theory one that I think a lot of people will jump to straight away, and this is what I jumped to first of all as well. Main theory one is this, that Balthazar lost his battle with his half-brother, Menzies. So this was one of the fundamental things we knew about Balthazar. In his realm, the Fissure of Woe, where he had dominion, he was eternally at war, his Eternals versus his half-brother and the Shadow Army. In GW1, we went in there to be tested by Balthazar, and we helped him regain a lot of control in the Fissure of Woe. But so, the main theory is that maybe he lost this battle. Maybe Menzies defeated Balthazar. Menzies really was the one who abated him, and now he has really very little left. There's a couple of good points to this theory. This explains why Balthazar, in the Flashpoint instance, would say, I've learned there is no honor in war. And this is specifically really cool, right? Because in GW1, when you look at the Fissure of Woe, you're seeing Menzies being a trickster and being a deceiver and lacking honor through and through. And we're seeing that Menzies is always making making advances on the battlefield through deceit and cunning. And that's how he's been getting his upper hand. And if he finally succeeded, if Menzies finally beat Balthazar through all of these kind of underhanded methods, I think that would be crushing for Balthazar. That would make you think, yeah, there is no honor in war. I'm honorable and I lost this war. There's obviously no honor. The answer is to be deceitful. And that's why then when we see him in Guild Wars 2, 250 years later, what's he being? What's Balthazar being? He's not being honorable anymore. He's being deceitful. He's hiding as Lazarus, withholding information, and basically manipulating us. That's not honorable at all. And so this is something I really like, the idea that Balthazar actually got beaten by his half-brother, and then he fell. This idea as well, I'll tack on just for a moment. A lot of people have wanted to talk about this, and that's the idea that maybe Balthazar isn't Balthazar, guys. Maybe Balthazar is Menzies, because he's being deceitful and so forth, right? And as fun as that idea is, all right, I can't get on board with it. I think it is way too messy and way too convoluted as storytelling that ArenaNet would actually sit down and say, okay, let's do a story where Lazarus is Balthazar is Menzies. Like this whole idea with the mirrors and stuff, like they'd have to explain why there's another level that we couldn't penetrate or whatever. I think it would just be really bad, and I very rarely use this term. I think it would be cringy for it to be revealed that Balthazar is now Menzies. I think that would be awful. I think the idea is that we've seen some character growth, we've seen some development and some change in Balthazar. Balthazar is Balthazar. He simply has started to become like his brother, something that he once upon a time really detested. And I think that's a really great, beautiful story there, actually, and something they could go into quite deeply. So that's theory number one. It's got some good points. It does explain this no honor in war thing, but it is a little bit iffy as well, right? So, like, Balthazar says they abated me. So if the answer is he lost his power and his strength and stuff and he's just hateful towards his half-brother, why would he say they? Who is they in that context? It doesn't quite work, does it? Maybe you could say they is still the gods. Perhaps it's that Balthazar was losing the battle with his half-brother, and as he's losing, he goes to the other gods and he says, please, you guys have to help me, come on, please let me gain control, and the gods refuse to, and he feels slighted by them. Maybe the gods saw what way the wind was blowing and ended up favoring Menzies instead, and so when he lost to Menzies, he considers that to have been all of them working against him, if you will, similar to how they all once upon a time worked against Abaddon to imprison Abaddon. So maybe we can go that deep, but that's not that convincing to me. There's not enough to really suggest that that's true. Further, if he's lost his war with Menzies and that's what's caused him to lose his strength, then that's him being abated, right? If it's, oh, he lost the war and then the gods were like, all right, well, screw you, we're going to go off with Menzies. How is that the other gods abating him? He's already abated in losing the war. So I'm not quite sure I sit with that. They could also, by the way, as another explanation for this, when he says they abated me, he might not be talking about the other gods at all. He might simply be talking about Menzies and Menzies cohorts, like the Shadow Lords and the higher ranking members of the Shadow Army. Maybe that's who they is. It's the Shadow Army in a broad perspective. But I feel like if I was writing a story that Balthazar was angry because he lost his war with his half-brother, I wouldn't have him say in this scene, they abated me. I would have him say, he abated me. He is even more specific and even more interesting and exciting, really, as a line. So I think that I would never have said they there, and I'm not entirely sure that it fits. So that's theory one, that Balthazar lost his battle with Menzies. Theory two, then, is quite similar. It's what if Balthazar won his battle with Menzies? And so there is something very interesting to look at in Guild Wars 2. A lot of you know that in the recent Gem Store update, they added a greatsword, I think it was, called Menzies Anguish or Menzies Agony. Obviously, Balthazar is a very big, iconic greatsword as well, so I kind of like that idea with the two brothers, that they might both have greatswords. Kind of a similar thing to Sahothin and Magdea, right? But there's a suggestion in that Gem Store name that, you know, Menzies isn't in a good position, right? And that's not actually the first time that the devs have suggested something like this. Obviously, it is just a Gem Store update, but it's a very contemporary, current one, and I think they are trying to make the player base see something here. And if you go back to 2012, when Guild Wars 2 first came out, and probably they did advance internally a lot of the story of the gods to understand what was going on, there was an interesting skin that came out of the Mystic Forge. I think it's a torch. I'm not quite sure. I think it's a torch or maybe a warhorn. But there is a weapon that you can get from the Mystic Forge with Mystic coins and so forth called the Fate of Menzies. Yeah, who'd forgotten about this thing? This is a very interesting weapon here. The Fate of Menzies. And very curiously, the skin of this weapon, this unique weapon, the skin is a decapitated head on a stick. So if we look back at theory 1 from a second ago in this video, that Balthazar lost his war. If he lost the war, why do we have a current gem store update with a weapon named as such? And why do we have a decapitated head on a stick called the Fate of Menzies? Come on, this is suggesting the opposite, guys. This is suggesting that Menzies was defeated. Balthazar didn't lose in the Fissure of Woe. Balthazar won in the Fissure of Woe. Look at what happened in Guild Wars 1. We went there as the player characters, and we gained loads of territory and ground for Balthazar. We helped him out a huge amount. Balthazar was in the superior position. Who's to say that he didn't take advantage of that superior position and defeat his half-brother for once and for all, chopping off his head? Remember, there is some lore that says from this little camp in Guild Wars 2 in 2012, they released this, that Balthazar came to the battlefield, that Balthazar appeared on the scene as a god, holding the head of his decapitated father. And the suggestion might be that, you know, these are half brothers. Maybe it's the father that was killed. And if you were Balthazar and you'd been at war over this with your half brother for years and years and years, and you killed him, wouldn't you want to chop his head off? Wouldn't that line up perfectly for why we have a torch now called the Fate of Menzies that is a decapitated head? Come on, guys, this just works too well. So maybe Balthazar won his war. And so this is all very convincing and nice, but now we have to wonder, why is Balthazar here on Tyria? If he won the battle, if he got even stronger, how is he as he currently is? Well, let's look back at his the information he gave us. They abated me. So what if the suggestion is that he won his battle, and then the other gods were somehow offended by this? They didn't like that he'd won this battle. Maybe they disagreed with whatever this fundamental argument between half-brothers was in the first place. Don't forget that Balthazar has a poor temperament. Balthazar has been demonstrated in other areas of the story to be a pretty dickish guy and not a particularly nice person, contemptible even in ways. And so maybe the other gods didn't like that he beat Menzies. Maybe the other gods kind of preferred Menzies, and Balthazar winning didn't sit correctly with them, thus leading to them to abating him. And also think about this. Balthazar is the god of war, right? Beating Menzies means that Balthazar has won his war. What does a god of war do once his war is over? Well, maybe he seeks to wage even more wars. Maybe Balthazar grew tired, he grew bored, he decided to find new campaigns in other realms, other places owned by the other gods. Perhaps Balthazar, through his hubris, started aggressing the other gods. And perhaps in seeing this was what ticked them over the edge. And this is why they, if indeed they is the other gods, turned it around and slapped him down to where he is here in Flashpoint. And so I think that theory probably does hold a bit more weight, the idea that Balthazar won in the Fissure of Woe. This does explain the torch, this explains why he might have been abated, this explains why as well he'd say there's no honor in war. You know, he wins his war and he doesn't get any accolades for that. So I really think there's a lot to chew on there. There are some iffy kinks and things to work out here as well, though, which I do want to touch on, and quite a few other people have. And this is also something that came up in Flashpoint. It's the fact that Balthazar was able to hide himself, seemingly through a mirror enchanted by Lissa. And so neither of these two theories, which both assume that he fell out of favor with the other gods, really accounts for why he has mirror. And none of them really account for the fact, it seems to suggest maybe Balthazar's actually not fallen out of favor with all the gods. Maybe he's still in allegiance, at least with Lissa. And Lissa's always been the most inscrutable and mysterious and weird and bizarre of the gods, so I kind of like that she sits in a weird place here. But the idea is, if Lissa gave Balthazar a mirror to deceive people on Tyria, then why would she do that? Why is she with him while the other gods might be against him, or what's going on there? Well, don't forget that in Guild Wars 1, around Winter's Day, at least the humans interpreted the gods as having like these friendly competitions against one another. Grenth being opposed to Dwayna and so forth, and maybe Lissa could have staked up with Balthazar and how Balthazar feels. But if you don't buy that possibility, I think the thing that I prefer is maybe Balthazar just stole this mirror. Maybe he got this mirror without Lissa's permission. The idea of Balthazar stealing from her or taking it in a subtle way, that's another example of Balthazar being deceitful. Balthazar stooping to his half-brother's level after perhaps he's slain him on the battlefield, which again, I think is such a cool story and something I really like. So maybe there isn't an allegiance going on between Lissa and Balthazar, but it is something to consider. It is something to think about. And there is another snag as well. specifically with this Lissa thing. And it's one of the biggest problems with Flashpoint, and it's one of the biggest problems with the story in general, Season 3 in general, and it's got a lot of discussion, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about this in the comments. But there's a big question, right? So Balthazar falls out of favor with whoever, loses a lot of his power, becomes abated, comes to Tyria to destroy the dragons to gain his power back. But instead of arriving as Balthazar, he simply comes and pretends to be Lazarus. He uses Lissa's mirror to look like Lazarus the Dyer. Why does he do this? It doesn't make much sense. If you are Balthazar and you are going to a planet where one of the most populous races worships you, and many of the other populous races at least appreciate your strength and would happily collaborate with you, if your goal is essentially to defeat the Elder Dragons, and you know that a lot of them want to defeat the Elder Dragons, and most of them are stupid enough that they'd want to do it, why wouldn't you just appear as Balthazar? Why would you seek the favor of purely just the White Mantle by masquerading as a god to the White Mantle of an extinct race that most of them haven't even seen? Balthazar didn't even get the strength of all of the White Mantle. He only got a fraction of the White Mantle on side. Why would he do that instead of getting all of humanity and then potentially many more other people by being a lot more blunt? Why the deceit? Why not walk among the humans? And so it is a very interesting question. A lot of people have been posing that this is just a plot hole and the devs have done a terrible thing and that they were trying to do 2 stories at once and it all got muddied and they don't have a good reason. Now, as much as it's fun to be that pessimistic, I think there is some opportunity for a really cool dive into some of the more interesting lore here if the devs take this in the right direction. So one theory is that a lot of people have had relating to the Lissa thing is, what if, out of all the gods that don't like Balthazar, Lissa is keeping a keen eye on him, all right? And what if actually Lissa is present on Tyria right now, and if Balthazar were to come on Tyria and be Balthazar, Lissa would say, no, you don't, you're not doing any of this with it, and Lissa would tell the other gods, and Balthazar's plan would fail. So Balthazar needed to hide as something, masquerade as something, to be able to get some followers, and ultimately he just chose Lazarus because he saw there was a power vacuum there, and he saw that he could step into it, and the White Mantle were fanatical enough to help him there. So maybe that's what he did. Maybe the gods have got an eye on Tyria. Maybe they have been watching. And a lot of people like the idea that it might be Lissa, because this lines up very well with Lissa's scriptures. Lissa, way back in the days of Awe, where our first introduction to Lissa, really, in terms of the lore, is her hiding among the people in the village of Ren, and it's only when one of them shows her kindness that she reveals herself and she says, you are my favored. So maybe Lissa is hiding on Tyria. And if you like that idea, then it gets even cooler thinking about who is Lissa, if Lissa's hiding on Tyria to keep an eye out for Balthazar. And then maybe you can speculate that it's Jenna, or it's Anise, or it's both of them, and you get all of this fun stuff going on at the higher levels of human politics and so forth. And if that is all true, if that does become a thing, then, you know, Balthazar was forced to reveal his hand here in Flashpoint, guys, and you would see some resolution to that pretty goddamn quick, right? Maybe even next episode or sometime during the next expansion or something. So we could see all of that. People like thinking about that. I'll say, though, as much as there's space for it, I don't see too much precedent for it. But there's something else that I'm quite interested in here. Why was Balthazar so desperate to not appear as Balthazar? Why did he choose to jump through all these hoops to appear as Lazarus instead? And this actually isn't a new question. And that's what is exciting about this to me. This isn't new. If you look at the lore, specifically a lot of the 2012 lore, about the gods and about the way that the gods acted when they were on Tyria, when they were present to us, when they were communicating with humanity, right? Especially when they lived there, most of them weren't interacting with humanity that much anyway. They hid away into Ara. They weren't just on Awe, but they were mostly hiding away in Ara. They were mostly not appearing before the people. Now, is this because they were blinding people all the time, or is there maybe something a little bit more going on here? Again, thousands of years ago, we have Lissa doing the kind of the same thing as Balthazar has been when Balthazar was masquerading as Lazarus here. It seems like maybe there's an opportunity for the devs to tell a deeper story here, that there's a more fundamental reason among all gods as to why they don't want to appear among the people, even when they're seeking to be worshipped by them. that caused Balthazar to then do all this crazy stuff, appearing as Lazarus instead. So we can be pessimistic and just say, oh, this was bad writing, Balthazar has no motivation, blah, blah, blah. But I think if the devs can really solidly answer this and tie it back into why they hid away in ore so much and stayed separate from the people and consider themselves that superior to people, I think if they tie all that stuff together, that could be really, really, really beautiful, and one of the more fun things one of the more fun directions that the story could be going in here, which is very cool. Last of all, guys, I think this is a lot of the big topics. Last of all, I will leave you with one more question, one more speculation, one more exciting thing with all these new Balthazar directions and things that we've got in. I'll end the video with this. And that's that if we assume it was the gods that abated Balthazar, Balthazar won his war, the gods abated him, right? If that is really what's going on, if it's not some extra, entirely new faction, third party we haven't heard of yet, right? If the gods abated Balthazar, how did they do it? I opened the video talking about Abaddon, right? And looking back at the story of Abaddon, looking back at what happened in Nightfall, if any of those aspects of the story which went into the gods, if any of them demonstrated anything, it was that a god cannot mess about, really, with another god. A god cannot take away from another one. They can fight one another, they can be opposed to one another, but try as they might, 5 gods could not stop Abaddon from existing. 5 gods could not abate Abaddon. Abaddon had to be swept under the rug. He had to be imprisoned and put in a realm and you know, out of sight, out of mind, where even there he continued gaining strength and he went crazy and he was trying to break out, but he had to be pushed aside for a little while. He could not be stopped. Abaddon was still a god, and yet here we have Balthazar, who seems to have been stripped of most of his godliness and just cast aside and thrown about like a bit of trash in the wind. So how did that happen? How have the gods, if it was the gods, abated Balthazar? If we assume as well that Balthazar won his war and that Menzies is dead, then that doesn't mean that, you know, if we assume that Menzies won the war, we could say that Menzies took all of Balthazar's magic and then that's how it happened. But Menzies is out of the picture, and that seems like a pretty safe bet. So what does that mean? Does that mean that there's a mortal like Cormier mixed up in all of this somehow? And that mortal took Balthazar's strength? That could be very, very interesting. I guess we'll see. So thanks very much for watching, guys. That's a bit more Balthazar speculation, a lot of the big ticket items. If there's any other major things, let me know. I know that the comments are going to be amazing on this one. Don't just leave your own, but respond to other people. I'll be down there as much as possible, and I will see you guys again for more awesome stuff very, very shortly. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Oh, it could be good.